What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the fourth annual MVG Christmas Eve live stream. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. You guys know I don't actually live stream very much. I do it maybe a couple of times a year, but I always look forward to this particular live stream. Just a end of year celebration of the year, and just to kick back and just relax. And I have a very special guest with me tonight, and it's Audi. You may know him from Digital Foundry videos with John Linneman, but Audi, for those folks that have not recognized you or they don't know who you are, why don't you go ahead and give your elevator pitch and introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Audi. I'm also known as the most profitable porn star out of Europe. And I can be seen in DF Retro for the most part in that capacity. But yeah, I've been around for about 17 years in video gaming. And then recently now started appearing in DF Retro for the most part. So I guess that's where most of your audience would know me from.
Yeah.
So
But your
that's the best elevator pitch I can do.
but your background is in game development or game dev. You are a game producer, and you work with a studio now, and you work on multiple different things. Do you want to let the audience know what you're working on and what your background is and where you've come from and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I worked in different capacities in video games for the last 17 years. I started out in video music production. I say production because I was the worst composer of all time, so I couldn't do any composing, I found out, but I could produce pretty well.
Yep.
So I started working with the different symphony projects that were in Germany at the time, for the most part, early on, as well as doing writing for like Destructoid and Retro Gamer and Edge Magazine and all these magazines in the 2000s. And then, yeah, in the last 10 years, I've been localizing Japanese games and producing new games for primarily Sakai Project, which is a company out of Los Angeles and Tokyo. And then recently, I was also hired in to help on Turrican Anthology.
Yes. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yes, now you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So, and I also worked on some other games recently that people might have seen, like Cotton Reboot.
Yeah.
Which is another Japanese shooter.
I wanted to ask you about that. How did that come about? Because Cotton is it's a game I'm very familiar with. Obviously, has its roots as an old Sega 16 game. I guess was the original one, right? And then there was Cotton Boomerang on the Saturn, and I think Cotton 2 on the Saturn. And there was it Rainbow Cotton on the Genesis? So how do you get the Cotton franchise on the Switch? How does that happen in 2020?
Well, I mean, so Cotton in Japan is kind of like a cult mascot, right? And has always been around, as you mentioned, Sega 16 arcade, and then X68 home computer, and eventually on Super Famicom and Saturn and all these, was just always a cult classic.
Yeah.
And then recently, the original developer Success was kind of collaborating with a company called Beep. And Beep is it's a store and it's really a company that's been around in Tokyo and Akihabara since the 80s, and now has gone into game production. And Beep is very familiar with me because I've been helping out a lot with PC-98, the old Japanese home computer.
I have one.
I've been helping out with preservation. Yeah, great.
Yeah,
I'm
love
happy
them.
we should do a stream with that one day.
I'm planning on it, I'm sure, yeah.
Oh, well, I'll be there. But I've been doing a lot of PC-98 and just obscure Japanese game development and history with them. And so when Cotton Reboot came up as an opportunity for them, they also kind of dragged me in because I was already helping out with Turrican for the same publisher that would go on to do Cotton. So they were just kind of like, why don't you design, this collector's edition, and actually also help translate the in-game portion of it.
Awesome.
So, yeah, which is kind of like, why don't you just join this as well? Because you're already kind of in the system.
Yeah.
and you know what cotton is, and we would like someone that knows about cotton to kind of help out with the reboot, because it really is a new opportunity to bring the character out in the West, because it hasn't really been seen in the West much, but it is kind of a cult classic even in the West.
What was the last cotton game? Was it
That was the one on
Panoramic
PS2,
Cotton,
wasn't it?
or was there one on the
Mm,
PS2?
I know at least it was like the Dreamcast one, which wasn't the best one.
Right.
I feel like there was a PS2 one. Maybe someone in the chat can like
Someone
say
knows.
that
Yeah.
maybe it's a pachinko game, but
It
there
could
is
be.
something cotton on the PS2,
Yeah.
and so that would be the last one. But the last few haven't been all that, I don't know, special. So I was pretty happy when they told me about Reboot. That it's just kind of the first game rebooted.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best one. So it's a good opportunity
I used to
to
have
bring it out.
I still collect arcade boards, but I haven't bought an arcade board for years because the prices now are very counterintuitive, as you can appreciate. But one of my earliest pickups was STV motherboard, and it came with a Cotton Boomerang. And man, that game was brutal, but it was so much fun to play. It's a great
That's a
game.
good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Cotton 2 is also, I mean, pretty good. And then, yeah, the STV that has that Batman Forever game on it as well.
That's right.
The beat 'em up.
Yeah.
And Final Fight Revenge.
Yeah.
Only
Unfortunately,
the best.
I got rid of most of my STV games. I don't know why I did that. Like sometimes I wonder why, but I still have Die Hard Arcade and Radiant Silver Gun and some of the classics. But I mean, it's just a Sega Saturn, really. I mean, it's not really any different at all hardware wise. So if you have them on the Saturn, you've got the games anyway. You know.
Let me ask you the most important question: is Die Hard Arcade a Christmas game?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I mean, we're getting stuck into the tough questions early. I don't think it is. Like, it's Dynamite Deku, right? I mean, that's the Japanese version of the game, and then there was a sequel, Asian Dynamite, on the Dreamcast. Dynamite Deku 2. I would not consider them Christmas games, even though Die Hard is a Christmas movie, of course. What would you say to that?
I would say that the localized version has been localized to be a Christmas game.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say that's fair, but
Depends what region you play it in and if you celebrate Christmas. I mean, it could technically be a Hanukkah game. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not sure, but I think Die Hard the movie is a Christmas movie.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, we the family and I just got back and watched it. We watch it every year, and as a lot of families do. It's definitely a Christmas movie. It's a great Christmas movie as well.
That and Batman Returns back to back
Yes, absolutely.
brings you in the festive spirit.
We got a super chat from Yo-Yo Yoshio 267. Staying up late for this 1:31 a.m. Couldn't miss my favorite Aussie nerd and Bubsy fanatic collabing. Yeah. Thank you for the kind words there, Yo-Yo.
Yes. Yeah. I'm very happy that someone recognized me for specifically Bubsy.
Yeah,
let's see how long it takes until the CDI shout out comes.
Well, hey, this is this area here is a CDI free zone. I don't know if that's that's good or bad, but I don't have one in the house, so
you don't.
No.
So you never have a good Christmas then.
I have a great Christmas. I've had many great Christmases, but I did see that stream that you guys did with My Life in Gaming the other night, and you guys were playing Zelda on the CDI. That was
that's right.
That was interesting.
That's the PC remakes of the CDI Zelda games.
Oh, I thought you guys were playing on the CDI.
No. So those are actually someone went into Game Maker and recreated those CDI Zelda games.
Oh wow!
But with all the fixes it would need to be a mediocre game rather than bad. So now it runs at like 60 frames per second. The menu management is better. It's really amazing work when you consider that it took 4 years and was his first project. but I guess some people will question whether or not it was worth it or not. But for game preservation, I would say it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. I'm going to get nerdy, and you may not know the answer, but do you know how he re-encoded the videos and all that stuff in Game Maker? Maybe it's a question I can find out by other means.
Yeah,
but...
Dopley would be able to. He did great work with that. I'm pretty sure he just nearest neighbored it and like WebM or something.
Yeah.
But he also added subtitles with the games in like in-game font, so it looks all professional. So it's an amazing achievement to port those two games and not have any. He had no experience coding,
Mm-hmm.
so it really shows you how versatile that game maker has become.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize. I thought
you fought a game on the CDI ran at 60 frames per second.
Well, that's what I thought, right? And that's why I got interested in the stream, because I was like, wow, is this hardware capable of this? And you guys fooled me, because if I didn't know that it was a PC remaster, we'll say, of the game, then I would have just assumed it was running on the CDI.
See, if this was a recorded video, I would just tell you, like, you should edit out this part because you just like ruined your reputation.
We'll clip it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. I'm friends with Wrestling with Gaming, so I've already ruined my reputation many times with CDI. I'm sure with the CDI community.
Now that you and I are engaging with each other, I'm sure the CDI will land in your lap soon enough. It happens to everyone I touch. It's just like magically they get a CDI, and then like, you know, there are two Christmas games on it. There's Christmas Crisis and Christmas Country. Both of them are actually games, platforming games.
I may have to set it up for next year. I mean,
actually, yeah, you should, because Christmas Country specifically was originally an Amiga game that was then ported to the CDI, but was not released on the Amiga.
That's interesting, because there's not very many good Amiga Christmas games. Obviously, Christmas Lemmings is one of them, but there's only like a handful of them, and none of them are particularly good except for Lemmings, of course. So
Lemmings. There's James Pond has like these.
Is that a Christmas game though? It's got like snow and you know, it's got like a vibe about it, but is it truly a Christmas game? You know.
Oh man, I used to play it on Christmas. Yeah. Because of that snow stage. But you are right. I mean, once you get into it, it's not really. But I associate with Christmas, if that helps.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely, you know, that connection to Christmas, and I don't want to take it away from you, Audi. You know, like I definitely want you to
leave my memories alone.
We got
it's all I have.
We got some more super chats. Let me go through them real quick. Chris R with $2. 1941 is a Christmas movie. Okay. Matt Mario Water 99 cents. Thank you. No message. Joe, Limited Run Joe's in the chat. Demetrius, here is a tip just so I can tell Audi he is a treasure. Thanks for that, Joe. Thanks for stopping in the chat.
That's very heartwarming.
Absolutely. Good to see you here, buddy. James Walters, $50 with a really cool animated GIF. I love it. Thank you. Nathan Lopez, $5, how a pair of tweezers defeated security on the CDI. I love your videos, MVG. Cannot wait for your content and ventures next year. Thank you, Nathan. I don't think you even need a pair of tweezers to defeat security on the CDI. Or you can tell me, but I'm assuming you can just burn discs and play them.
I would argue that the CDI defeats you every time you turn it on.
It's funny you mention, you know, eventually you'll get a CDI, or the CDI will consume your life. Last year, I was at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and we were sitting in the hotel lobby, and I was chatting with Wrestling with Gaming, and we're about 5 or 6 beers into it, and he said to me, it was like midnight, and he's like, let's go back to the hotel room. I've got the CDI set up. We'll play some games. And I was like, nah, it's cool, man. I went back to my room. So you know, just think about that for a minute. Like, I think, you know, I'm fighting this urge, right? But eventually it's just going to wear me down, you know. Maybe it's next year. We'll see.
That's a very similar story to how I met my wife.
Right on. Replica X, $100. Thank you. Thank you so much. No live action mini cute play. Merry Christmas to you and the fan buddy. Cheers. Hey, thanks Replica X, man. It's good to see you in the chat. And yeah, Merry Christmas. I'll stop by the Discord sometime and say hi to all you guys. I miss hanging out with you guys, but I appreciate you stopping in. Yeah, I've got a one of my arcade cabinets. Audi is a Capcom Mini Cute, which is it's a pretty. It's not a rare candy cabinet, but it's a pretty sought after one. And I've been telling the guys for years I'm going to make a video on it, and I never get around to it. You know, there's always something more pressing that comes up. You know, but I'll get there eventually, I'm sure. So.
I'm scared of collecting PCBs for arcade. I have a few. I had to get. I wrote a book a few years ago, and I had to get like 4 or 5 for that because, like most other Digital Foundry people and whatnot, I'm like, oh, it has to be played on original hardware.
Yeah.
Which just means a lot more work and death and destruction.
Yeah.
But I have bought a few arcade games like Asterix. I had to have Asterix, the original PCB, and a few others, but it's not my main area of collecting.
I at one point I had about 100 PCBs, but I've since pared back. I probably have about 25 now. I got rid of a whole bunch. I just went through that phase where you could get them real cheap in the early 2010s on Yahoo Japan and places like that. No PCB would cost you more than maybe $150 to $200. Even the you know, the high end stuff, like, you know, a game like R-Type, for example, which is a pretty sought after PCB these days. But back then it was, no one was really buying them because no one really knew what to do with them, you know. But since then, arcade PCB collecting is you know, it's like everything, you know, it's a lot more expensive these days. But I still have about 25 choice PCBs, and I like them. I usually, you know, will rotate through them in the arcade cabinet, you know, once a year and get my fill, and then, you know, not think about them for a while. But it's fun. It's a fun hobby. But you're right. There's a lot of heartache and pain involved with arcade cabinets and arcade collecting. Man. You know. Yeah,
it's the community around it is pretty fun. I have to say, getting into that. But yeah, just the maintenance, the storage, the setup, to get anything out of them, I was not prepared for it back then. But I still have them laying around somewhere. I put them in like UPS boxes with like foam inside.
That's what I do.
Yeah. That's the best idea I had.
Yeah, they don't present very well, you know, so you got to just, you know, stick them in the box and pull them out when you need to. But I guess the other thing is, some of them have really weird refresh rates and stuff, you know, like I think about IRAM games, R-Type, it's like 57.3, you know, megahertz as the refresh rate and all that sort of stuff. They're very, very finicky sometimes, but it's also a very rewarding hobby as well if you have, you know, an arcade cabinet with a good CRT and some good games for it.
Isn't it Mortal Kombat that's like 75 hertz, something like that?
Replica X, he'll know. He's a MK fan in the chat, but it's got a weird refresh rate. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's just a little weird. And as a result, all of the kind of the home ports, you know, from the arcade or otherwise, aren't quite right for that reason, because it just runs at a different refresh rate than everything else. So it makes it a little tricky to kind of nail it when you're thinking about Mortal Kombat 2 running on, you know, just a home console or something.
Yeah, this is a thing. When I made an episode of DF Retro about Mortal Kombat with John, and we went through every single port and the original arcade version. And that's something we discovered, was just that original refresh rate really made a big difference on subsequent ports and also the home ports of the arcade original that came out, because none of them run correctly in the end, because you can't really do that anymore now. So I've always wondered how they did it with the one-up arcade systems, if it's just the same as like any other PS3 port and whatnot. But
I don't know. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't have the arcade one up stuff, but I'm not really sure how they did that. But I'm assuming it's just a variant of MAME, right? So they based it off of that. So
yeah, I've never tried one actually.
yeah,
I see them at E3, but unfortunately, when you work with video games, you never have time to like play them.
yeah.
So never got to try it out.
MK runs at an odd 54 hertz refresh rate. There you go.
Oh, 54. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just kind of really out there. You know, it's when you try to make a home version of that game running at 60 hertz or 60 FPS, it just throws things out of whack a little bit.
Right.
But, a couple more super chats here. G Million 99 cents, no message. Thank you so much. EB Chill 2, $5. Merry Christmas to both of you. MVG, I feel your subscriber count has doubled this year. Great to see good things happen to good people. Thank you so much, EB Chill. Appreciate the kind words. Yeah, I've had a pretty good year on YouTube, but it's been a lot of hard work as well. It's not just, you know, sitting back and watching the numbers kind of increase. There's obviously a lot of work that was done this year on the channel, and hopefully next year will be, you know, more of the same, and the continued growth of the channel. We'll see how it goes.
You were also on Ars Technica recently. You were featured there.
I was, yeah, that was fun. Yeah, Ars Technica interviewed me for a they call it the YouTuber reads 1,000 top comments or something. It's not 1,000 comments, but basically what they do is they do a whole bunch of research on your videos, and they just kind of pull out random ones, and they basically just ask you to react to them. And it was fun, you know, to do that. So that was a lot of fun to do that. I know LGR has done one, and Linus Tech Tips has done another one, but yeah, that was a lot of fun to do with those guys. Michael Will 999 MVG, you have a great presentation voice. I'm very interested in your videos due to the gaming aspect, but you also have a great ASMR quality to your videos as well. Keep up the great work.
I
Thanks,
agree.
Michael. Yeah, I sure. Okay. I don't know about the ASMR thing, because, like, you know, ASMR, right? You know, you kind of got to get really quiet like this. But I have one level, you know, like my voice doesn't really get any softer or any louder. It's just like, boom, it's the same kind of velocity every time. So, but hey, I appreciate the kind words there, Michael, for sure.
Oh man, I'm envious because I barely have a voice. I've been training all year to like sound like a human being. Because when I was doing videos with John and stuff, it's just like, man, you need to speak up. And it's like, you know, I'm Norwegian. We don't speak.
Well,
it's not even about speaking up.
Your English is perfect, though. I mean, I can kind of slightly detect the accent, but only very, very slightly. It's on point for sure. So.
Oh, thanks. I was taught by Hulk Hogan and the Ninja Turtles. So.
Yeah, you grew up on that stuff, huh?
I grew up on that stuff. That and the microcomputers. Speaking of which, I think we were supposed to play a game today.
Yes. Sorry, I tend to ramble. So I have Holiday Lemmings here, and we've got the Amiga cam on the bottom there. So this is real hardware as it should be. I when I was setting this up, I was going to cheat and just get the emulator out. But I was like, nah, let's make this count, right? So I love the Amiga, and I want to do more Amiga related content, but it's there's a lot of other things going on. But I thought I would kind of finish up the year with some good Holiday Lemmings. So, did you ever play Lemmings at all on any particular version, or did you get into the game at all?
Yeah, I played it a lot on. I had a friend that had it on DOS. I had the DOS version. And then I did eventually play the NES version, which another friend of mine had at school, so I traded it for Bugs Bunny's Birthday Blowout, I remember. And I got stuck with Lemmings.
Yeah.
I think I got the better deal in the end, but I remember it mostly from the NES, actually, not so much the Amiga.
Yeah. I think most of the versions of the game are all pretty good. some ports are obviously better than others, but generally speaking, you get what you get. You know what I mean?
Right.
I actually like the Amiga version. I think the audio is obviously it's excellent, but I also like the 3DO version as well. If you've ever tried that one, that's actually a really good port.
I picked up the Japanese version of the 3DO Lemmings like a few years ago when I was working in Tokyo. Mostly because of the box art, but I did play it, and it's a really good version actually.
Yeah, the redbook audio is very good.
Very good.
Yeah, I it surprised me actually how good it was. Some of those tracks that they redid. But yeah, 3DO is great. Yeah, the DOS version is very good as well. I remember, you know, I was an Amiga owner, and I remember seeing the DOS version for the first time, and there's just something about it that just made me envious. You know, it's like, man, I wish I had a 486, you know, PC, because it just runs the game so much better than the Amiga version. And you know, the sound blasters were out at that point, and it was getting to that point where the PC was overtaking the Amiga as far as what it could do, and it kind of stood out in my mind as you know, a really good version of the game. But yeah, NES is good. I think about, like, even on the Super NES, you can play with the mouse as well. Most versions of Lemmings are pretty well handled, you know, for the most part.
Even the CDI version.
Well, I have to see look at the CDI version. Does it have the same Redbook audio as the 3DO version, or is it what's going on with the audio?
I'm not actually sure about that. I don't have the CDI version of it yet. I've been looking for it.
Is it harder to find?
I'm gonna guess. No, not really. I mean, you find it in CDI buckets at flea markets. That's where I find my CDI games, in the trash.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, I think this started out, though. Lemmings in itself started out as an idea on the NES, didn't it? Just to see how small the sprites could be.
I don't know if that's accurate. I think they were the story that I heard, and I'm sure someone in the chat will correct us, but that I think it was David Jones who designed the game, or someone at DMA Design was messing around with Deluxe Paint on the Amiga, and they were just messing around with like 8x8 kind of, you know, grid pixels to see what they could do, and they kind of designed the Lemmings character, and then they just based the game around it. But that may not be accurate, but that's what I believe was the backstory behind it. But I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But
I just saw a question from someone. Sam T asked if I'm with SekaiGames that made Clanad and Nekopara. Yes, I was the producer on those games. Don't Google them.
Don't Google them. Let's see. Bubba Matt 812 $5. Got any funny fan interaction stories? I'm always curious if any YouTubers have moments with fans that just leave them laughing. Ooh, not really sure about that. I mean, it's a hard one to answer right now, because like I've literally been cooped up in my house for the whole year, so it's not like, you know, I've been out to any conventions or anything. And when I think about, you know, the places I've been to, I haven't really had any kind of funny stories, I guess. But hopefully next year, you know, we'll get to conventions again and all that. So we'll put a pin in that one, Matt, and hopefully I'll have some funny stories to tell. Audi, do you have any stories, interaction stories about fans?
Fans?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I really have fans in that sense. When I go to conventions, it's always nice to meet the people who recognize me from DF Retro, and some people do recognize me from projects I did earlier. But I probably have more fun stories meeting developers and industry people than I do fans.
Yeah.
So, but as you say, maybe next year, maybe you'll come to my hotel room rather than.
Depends. Will you have a CDI or something else?
I'll have the CDI and the 3DO, so you have a choice.
Well, I'd say I like the 3DO.
I love the 3DO.
Yeah, dude, I'm a big fan. The 3DO is a guilty pleasure for me. I really enjoy that system a lot.
There's nothing to be guilty of, though. I mean, it's a system that was ahead of its time in many ways. The way it streamed data was very unique, and the library from both US and Japan and even Korea is unique. I mean, it's no other console really offered anything like the 3DO
Yeah.
at that time. So it's a very underrated system, and it's a shame it gets lumped with like Jaguar, and I guess it's because of the price point and the sales, right? But in terms of quality of its library, it's pretty much up there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. What would you say kind of your top 3 best games for the system?
For the 3DO, I mean, I have to say Road Rash as one of them, just because Road Rash is amazing. Um, I really like the Sailor Moon fighting game that's on 3DO. It's I think it's Sailor Moon S, if I'm not mistaken. Man, what else? So one of my favorite games of all time, or probably my favorite game of all time, is Another World, which is an Amiga game.
Yep.
And I would like to say the 3DO version is good, but I really hate it, so I'm not going to say that.
You don't care about the way that the kind of the artwork was kind of redone?
Oh, I hated the new artwork, and I really hated the music. It has this like sci-fi cowboy music.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, but it's like really weird and ill-fitting. I mean, there's a whole story around Another World and the ports that Interplay did, and the fight they had with Eric Chahi about this.
Right.
So I always wanted to do Another World DF Retro episode, because I've really been into that game my whole life. It's probably the most influential game to me of all time.
Oh, I remember when I got that game on the Amiga. I think I was in college at the time when that game came out, and I was well and truly in the swapping discs with my friends, copying games phase, you know. And it was like a weekend, and Monday morning comes around, we go to class, and my buddy hands me a couple of discs, and he gives me Another World on 2 discs, I remember. And man, I remember going home that night and playing the game. I was absolutely blown away that the Amiga could play again, make a game like this, play a game this great, and the story and everything, the rotoscoping, the animation, the sound. I mean, it's like the perfect game almost. And oh man, I remember staying up all night just trying to beat the game, and you know, I couldn't beat it the first time around, but I kind of beat the next night, and I just loved every minute of playing that game. And that intro, you know, I could sit there and watch that intro over and over again. It's amazing, absolutely amazing game.
It's, to me, still to this day, it is the prime example of, is video games art? And that is the answer, yes. Like, that game is why you can say yes.
Yeah.
Because that game is art from beginning to end. And yeah, the first time I played that was when it came out on the Amiga. I think I was certainly not in college. I can tell you that much. I was probably around 12 years old. But just that transcendent experience, because that was a game that could really just transport you, much like the character in the game.
Yeah.
You know, it was so, and everything is done with minimalism. There's so little being done, but it's done in a way that like you fill out all those blanks, and it really inspired me throughout my whole life. Like in so many ways, it's weird how you can apply that design philosophy to like so many things in life.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Another World is just it's a game everyone should play and talk about. It's
yeah, and you can get it
art.
You can get it on oops, that was a bad move. You can get it on you know, the Xbox Live Arcade, and
oh, you can get it on like every system ever made, like literally.
Yeah. It's on the
like
PS4,
even back then,
right? Yeah, you can play it pretty much anywhere. But yeah, I would recommend you checking it out. It's great. I know Limited Run did a physical of it at one point, which I have. It's also on the Vita.
Same.
Yeah, you're right. It's on pretty much everything. Did you ever get into Heart of Darkness at all?
Of course.
Do you like
I
that?
played that. Yeah, because once Another World came out, I became obsessed with Chahi. Heart of Darkness, I think, is also very underrated and a bit misunderstood.
Yeah.
But it's clear that it also does not fulfill its own expectations. It's
Right.
kind of, you get halfway and you're just kind of, is this it?
Yeah.
And it really, that is it. So it lacks something. I always wanted to talk to Chahi at length about that. I met him once, and we only got to talk a few minutes really. But if I ever do that DF Retro episode, I will definitely include Heart of Darkness in there.
Yeah, that game is. You're right. It could have been so much better, but it's still a really great game. I mean, you can tell that game went through some development hell, to come out in the end. But man, it's still impressive. I really like that game. I've got the PC big box copy of that game that I bought back in the day.
Yeah. I love that cover art with the red curtain and the monster in the background. I see My Life in Gaming in the chat. They're saying it's weirdly violent. It is. I mean, there's definitely some parts of that game that kind of make you, just flinch a little bit. There's definitely some moments in there, but it's a great game for sure. Well, it's good to see My Life in Gaming here, and my brothers out there. So I was just on their stream, as you mentioned. So
yeah,
I'm just stream hopping all week.
There you go. Let's read some more super chats here real quick. Rico 4628, €2. Have you ever been involved in the Amiga mod music scene? No, I haven't. I mean, I love the Amiga mod music scene, but I'm not involved in it. I'm just an avid listener to Amiga mods. How about you, Audi? Any connections there?
No. So to the mod scene, no. But I have worked with Chris Holzbeck for almost 15 years now. So I've been very much involved with the Amiga scene, which has also kind of gone into the mod scene a little bit. Just fans or meetups like Amiga 30 in Germany and whatnot. So I have a lot of respect for that community, though, because they do amazing stuff still to this day.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my better friends in the industry is Jonne Valtonen, who is Purple Motion, who was an amazing mod demo scene guy.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of respect for the demo scene, and you're right, it's still alive and kicking. Revision and all those demo parties they have every year. I always look forward to those demos that they bring out. It's just some of the things that they continue to do with that hardware is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I really love the micros. I love retro hardware, obviously. And in the last few years, the resurgence of new software, not so much just the modding scene, but or the demo scene, but the new software that has been coming out for the Famicom and Amiga and C64 from Protovision and all these companies. It's my main collection these days is actually these new games coming out for these older systems. Yeah. So it's really the best period of time to be a fan of these, because now we have better tools today. We have younger minds, so we just see so much creativity, even though the hardware is quite limited.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very well said. And yeah, I mean, I always go back to the old stuff and have a play around. You mentioned the PC-98. I've had one for years, and honestly, the last time I turned mine on was maybe about 2 years ago, but I have this urge to revisit it. I've got a whole bunch of games for it, and I definitely want to get back into that again. It's a lot of fun.
Why is there so many Necopara fans in your chat, MVG? What kind of content have you been putting out that I haven't seen?
Oh man, you don't even want to know. You should check my back catalog sometime. Let's see here. Paul Puich. Thank you so much. From the point of view of a developer, it's nice to watch your videos. Too bad the mistakes are not that frequent in our days. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I guess you're referring to security on modern systems, Paul. I mean, it's good for the hardware manufacturers, I guess, but there's I think I've said this before, but security on consoles is just a matter of time for most of them. I think eventually, they'll get broken one way or the other, but Appreciate the donation there. Thank you so much, Mr. Pete 1985, $5. Saturn mistakes were made, or Xbox One mistakes weren't made. Video in the future. I definitely want to cover the Sega Saturn security. It's not really a topic that I've really even touched before, but one of my goals for next year is give the Saturn more love on the channel, because I haven't really given it much. I've got the mode, and I've got some bits and pieces for it, so I'll definitely get some more Saturn content going. You a Saturn fan, Audi?
Oh, I love the Saturn. So anything with a strong Japanese library, I'm there.
Yep, absolutely. EB Chill again, $5. Audi, I bought the 3DO at list price when it came out. It still works great. So that's like $25 a year. Good deal. Nice one.
Yeah, wow. So what if you're in the US, that would have launched, was it $600 or was it 700?
I think it was six. I think it was six.
600.
Yeah. And I
And
remember the PlayStation came and just ate its lunch, right?
yeah, because that was like 1994.
Yeah.
So I don't know what, with inflation, I don't know how that much is, but it was quite expensive. I mean, that's a story in itself, was that it wasn't supposed to be that expensive. They were, the way the hardware was made and designed, it was meant that all these different manufacturers were going to put out their own version, create competition, and then launch at competitive prices. But in the end, I think only Panasonic and Gold Star picked up the design. So that meant that you had two with some kind of connection to each other, so the price wasn't pushed down. It's really a shame. I mean, the idea is so good.
It's very clever. It's one of those things that was kind of before its time, that idea.
Much before its time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was at the time also where, Nintendo had such a chokehold on the industry. And this was an attempt of kind of European. I mean, in Europe, it wasn't so much like this because we had the micros, we had a lot of options and a larger attachment rate to this, because we had all grown up with the micros. But in the US, these consoles were pretty much the only option outside of PC. So I really respect, Trepaking's thinking like this.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is a shame. You're right. I agree. The hardware is really good. I have a lot of love for the 3DO, and it is a shame that it didn't succeed. But hey, it's still a really interesting and great part of history, for sure.
Yeah, the data streaming capabilities of the 3DO, that technology, or the engineers that spearheaded this, actually went to Microsoft, and a lot of this was implemented in the Xbox.
Yeah, I heard that, and I guess another interesting tidbit is that RJ Michael and Dave Needle from the Amiga, from Commodore, worked on the 3DO hardware as well. So there's definitely that Amiga connection to the 3DO, which I really really appreciate as well.
So a lot of people thought you were going to actually have the car manufacturer on today. I'm very sorry to disappoint. Well, I can tell you that I used to drive an Audi, which made my life very confusing.
Yeah, Audi, driving the Audi, that would be so you get pulled over in the Audi, and then you hand over your license, and they're like, what? That's I see Spawnwave in the chat. How long will it take for the KFC console to get hacked? Is that KFC console a real thing? Like, is it just a PC, or is it actually a console?
I don't know, but I did see the announcement or the reveal of it, and it also heats up your chicken or keeps it warm. So
I mean, I'll have to get one, right?
Well, you have to get one. It's your public duty.
I want to take one apart and see what's going on in there.
Speaking of the 3DO, though, you were talking about people from the Amiga and such coming over to work on it. I can tell you one thing that I don't think many people knew of, or maybe no one really. But a few years ago, I was working with a composer named Rob Hubbard, and he was an amazing genius from the C64. He did like Monty on the Run.
Oh yeah.
Master of Magic. I mean, he's just a legend for us Europeans, at least. But I think he has his fan base in the US too. But he was at the Electronics Arts, and they were very instrumental in the 3DO, obviously, as Trip Hawkins did the 3DO. and he wanted to help out program a dedicated sound chip for 3DO, and he
Mm.
actually fought for this very hard. And this was shot down due to the CD capabilities. They didn't really need any dedicated sound hardware, but if history was different, it could have had a console that had actually sound chip designed by Rob Hubbard on it.
Yeah.
And he told me his plans for it, and it sounded like a SID chip plus plus plus. It would have been amazing, and he had plans for it that he wanted to do, but because they turned him down, he was it was one of the reasons he left the industry for as long as he did, was the disappointment of not having to do that 3DO project.
Oh man, that would have been incredible. I would have loved
You
to.
really should have him on your show one day and talk about that, because I don't think he's shared many of these stories anywhere.
I would like to chat with him. That I have too much. I would just fanboy out too much. I think I don't know if I could even ask any questions without just asking about how did you compose the music to Monty on the Run, or just asking questions about how do you get simultaneous instruments on the same track, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure he's been asked those questions a million times before, but man, that'd be great to chat with him for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll definitely talk to him about that, because I think he likes technical questions, and I think you will be someone that can give him that. I'm not that technically inclined,
Yeah.
so. But yeah, that was his little. Because I was always curious, because I knew he was at Electronics Arts, and I knew he was working primarily with programming at the time. So I was always curious why he never ended up on the 3DO, and that was the reason.
From my perspective, I lived in Australia at the time, and so I grew up on the Commodore 64. So Rob Hubbard was a household name to me. Most of the games that you would buy, especially the budget games like by Mastertronic, would have a Rob
Yes.
Hubbard tune on there. And usually the game was crap, but the tune was amazing. So you would just
Incredible.
listen to the title track or something. And when he left the C64 to go to EA, he kind of went dark. Like we didn't really hear much from him after that. I mean, he did stuff, but because he was, I guess, a part of EA, he was just, his name wasn't in the credits like it was on C64 games, where like on the title screen or something.
Yeah.
And I didn't really kind of follow his career after the C64, so it's always interesting to hear tales about what he was up to after, because I don't really after EA. I know he did some games on EA. I think he did like the Desert Strike games, maybe.
He did Desert Strike, and he did Road Rash. He did the original Road Rash.
I didn't know that.
So
that's pretty cool.
Primarily when he went to Electronic Arts, I think he was kind of a sound driver guy.
Yeah.
And not some. I'm really not sure why that would be, because he is an amazing composer.
Mm-hmm.
But as he said, he just kind of went. Maybe it was his own doing. I really don't know. What was weird about Rob for many years was that when I worked with Chris Holspec, there was always a request to kind of get Rob involved in projects, and every time I call him up, he was very much just kind of like, "Well, that's very nice of you, young man, but I'm out of the industry," and I would kind of be the end of that conversation for almost 5 years, and
Right.
then finally, not really sure. I guess just age and nostalgia, or just time heals all wounds. But he suddenly was kind of ready to come back, and now he fully embraces his career and his music, and he's been doing these symphony projects lately with orchestra and I think the Czech Philharmonic or something. But they've been orchestrating his music, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for him, because he was evidently quite bitter, and I don't know that story, but every time I talk to him on the phone, he's a wonderful person. So he wasn't mean, but he was just very not interested in talking about his career, and didn't do interviews, didn't show up in documentaries. But now he's fully back.
Did you ever follow any other C64 composers like Martin Galway and some of the other, like Martin did a lot of the Ocean games early on?
Yeah, I mean, I was very much involved with that community for many years. my closest friends from C64 would be Ben Daglish,
Okay,
who did
yeah.
Lost Ninja,
Yeah,
rest in peace.
absolutely.
And Matt Gray is a good friend of mine. I worked with him on several projects. He's also a very good guy. Of course, Chris. I mean,
Yep.
Chris is one of my best friends in real life, and we still talk every day. So I'm trying to figure out who else. Rob, I consider Rob a friend too.
Mhm.
I don't talk to him as much as I probably should, but he's a really fun guy. And Martin Galway, good guy.
Yeah.
Richard Joseph, I think, also left us, but
Yeah,
he was also a good guy.
man, I love Richard Joseph. He really he did some great stuff on the C64, but the Amiga was where he really did his best work, you know.
Yeah, he was incredible. Really, I talked to him a few times. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. And then I'm not sure what happened. I think he had some illness, but yeah, he left us quite a few years ago now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that community that is so. The thing about the C64, and you said earlier, you know, we grew up with it, and they were credited on the title screen. So the composers were as important as the game designers. You know, this is uncommon even in Japan, pretty much, until like Koshiro Yuzo did it on Streets of Rage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing was that we could find them kind of in magazines or in interviews. They were available and they spoke highly of their music work. And video game music for me was my one and true love. I mean, I love video game music since I was a toddler, ever since I played the Jonas Sisters.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a magical community because that knowledge and that the technical prowess of that SID chip is so special and unique, and you can only find it with the C64. You can kind of make a case for like FM synth, that you can kind of find these wizards.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like the personal connection that people have with the SID chip is wholly unique and creates some incredible stories.
Well, all those guys, I mean, you know a lot of them, you know, Matt Gray, Rob Hubbard, Galway, Hulsbeck, they all, it seems like they were a very close community, you know, at the time in the C64 days. Is that accurate to say that, or do you think?
No, it was not.
No?
They didn't meet. So that was the funny thing when I started working with Chris, was like, yeah, so we should just call up these guys, right, and like get the band together. He's like, what band? We don't know each other.
There's no band.
So yeah, there is no band.
Nice.
So I kind of had to create the Beatles, so to speak, when I was with him, because there was a lot of times where, you know, nostalgia is a powerful thing, and we wanted to bring them back for these projects. And you know, the Turrican Soundtrack Anthology, we brought Alistair Brimble,
Yep.
who's another great composer.
Oh yeah.
And things like this. So, but they weren't. So they were aware of each other, and then maybe they had a phone conversation back. But back then, you couldn't contact each other as easily as you can today.
Right.
So, yeah, it was just more just like due to the time, they respect each other's work. I know Chris and Rob had a lot of like respect and picked up each other's work.
Yeah.
But they didn't really meet until the mid 2000s when I was involved with them. And then I think for Chris Holzbeck, the one that he followed the most was Yuzo Koshiro, because he was really inspired by Japanese music.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another thing that I could help out with, because I know Koshiro quite well. So I've been able to have them work together several times in their career.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear. I'm actually really looking forward to I think Matt Gray's kickstarting the Last Ninja 2 at the moment on vinyl. So I
think yeah, he did it.
Oh, he's already done
it. Was done like many years ago.
Oh, I thought he.
But it's shipping now. Yes.
Yeah. I backed it, so I'm kind of waiting for that to get here. I'm looking forward to it. Last Ninja 2 is an incredible soundtrack.
Did you check out the Ninja Musicology project?
I didn't know about that one.
So the Ninja Musicology was a arrangement project where they took all the Last Ninja soundtracks and remastered it as a heavy metal
Oh wow.
band project. It's quite good actually.
Yeah.
So and had Ben Daglish actually perform on it, and it was a pretty cool project.
That's
So
awesome.
if anyone's into Lost Ninja, I would definitely recommend Ninja Musicology.
I think Last Ninja is another game that was a holy shit moment for me when I first, played that game, because I had the C64 with the tape drive, because in Australia, the disc drive it cost more than the system, and that's no exaggeration. So, as the pack-in family C64, you would get the system, and then you would get the the tape drive, right? So I ended up getting Last Ninja on cassette, and it was on like 3 cassettes or something ridiculous. Each side was one level or something like that, and you would be waiting for the level to load, but there's just this incredible music playing, while you're waiting for the level.
Music is insane, isn't it? And it's just, I don't know which game in that series I like the music of more, because they're very different from each other. Like the first one is quite like it's a bit chopsocky, but I love it. But it's very stereotyped, I guess.
Yeah.
Or a little bit cliched, I'd say, but in a good way. And then 2 is basically straight up just a metal album.
Yes.
And then 3, I think 3 is very underrated musically. It's by Rain Ovenholtz.
That's right, yeah. 3 is a little harder for me to get into, but I still really like the music.
The music is like super atmospheric,
yeah.
And it's really layered for a C64 soundtrack, because it's all like based around elements. It's like earth, wind, fire.
Right.
It's a great band, by the way. And that's incorporated into the music so well. You can hear like raindrops in the water music, and like in the wind music you had these custom winds. And again, this is like something that you really didn't get from those consoles at the time. But the SID chip, they pushed that so far.
Yeah, those filters on that chip were incredible, and it's it's definitely up there with some of the most memorable times, growing up and enjoying playing video games. I mean, The Last Ninja was an absolute classic game, but it's brutally difficult, and it's very unfair as well. You gotta time those jumps, and the controls aren't particularly great. But at the time when it came out, it was an absolute masterpiece, and it's still a very good game, and the sound is obviously very, very memorable.
Yeah, that's one of those games also that has like 10-minute long competitions. Like level 1 in Last Ninja is like 7.5 minutes, and it's just incredible. Where else? I mean, maybe on the PC98, there's certainly games that have like 15-minute compositions, which are incredible, but you couldn't find that on like a console. And of course, we have Chris's famous 7-minute Turrican 2 opening with the 7 voices.
Yep.
And things like this. So
that's another moment for me, was the first time I heard the 7-channel music from the Turrican games. I couldn't believe it. It's like, well, how is this even possible? What's this magic that's happening right now? And I remember rigging up my Amiga to my hi-fi system and just playing it through the stereo and recording it on a cassette and everything, and just being blown away by what was actually possible here, because I knew the limitations of the Amiga sound chip pretty well at that point, and just to kind of hear more instruments on either side was just, wow, that's amazing.
That might just be like the crowning moment of the Amiga, I'd say. I mean, I'm a bit biased, having worked with Chris so much, but every time I hear that Turrican 2 opening, I'm just kind of like, this cannot be eclipsed.
Yeah.
It's just one of those historic moments. Just like you, I remember the first time I loaded it up, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe. I remember one argument I always had with my friends back then, which kind of tells you a lot about me, but I never understood why this was never on MTV. I was just like, why isn't this music on MTV? And they would just be like, because it's video game music. Like, this is a terrible argument.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is so worthy of being on. I see Kraftwerk on there,
Yeah.
and they're great. But like this is just as good, but
Yeah.
still hasn't happened.
I
I guess
think,
MTV is no longer a music channel. It
yeah,
wouldn't
I mean,
matter.
video game music is a lot more kind of mainstream these days. I mean, you can listen to a lot of it on Spotify and these kind of streaming platforms, but you're right. I mean, it's still very much a, a niche kind of thing for the most part, but it's getting more accepted. Will there ever be, a video game music award at the MTV Music Awards? No, probably not, but maybe
But there should be.
there should be. I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you that there should be.
Yeah, I always worked. This was my main thing in video games. Even from the day I started. I started when I was 17, and I remember my very first job in the video game industry was I was an intern at Funcom,
Hmm.
which is the developer behind Age of Conan and Longest Journey and these things. It was the worst place I ever was, but it was also the place I knew I wanted to never be anywhere else because it's just kind of I didn't like the way they worked,
Yeah.
but I loved the results. So I was just kind of like, okay, I will never do what they do the way they do, but I want to do this. I want to work in the industry. So it was a learning experience. Anarchy Online also,
Yeah.
and just to my first day at Funcom, there was a guy called Didrik who was a wonderful guy, but he was showing me around. And he was like, "Oh, so this is where we like record the sound for Dreamfall, and here's this Age of Conan stuff that's coming up." They had just signed the Conan license at the time, so everyone was like piss drunk
Yeah.
because I came the morning that they had gotten the fax from LA saying that the agreement was in place and the signatures were approved. So that came in at like 4 in the morning for them. So I came at 7 in the morning, and everyone was still very drunk and high on this excitement. But Didrik was doing his best to sober up and show me around. And I was just like, I'm not that much into these games. I mean, I respect them, but
Yeah.
Anarchy Online and whatnot is not for me. But then in this dark room that looked like a janitor's closet, there was a IKEA glass display, and in there was all the console ports they'd done for Sega CD. So it was like Fatal Fury Special,
Hmm.
Samurai Showdown, all this pristine. And I ran over and I was like, "Oh my god, you guys worked on the Mega CD and the Super Nintendo?" And they were just like, "Why do you care about these old things? Like, no one cares about this." What? I don't care about any of these other games. I want to know about the Mega CD games you did. Like, how was it working on Samurai Showdown? And I just remember Didrik shook his head and left the room, left
Oh
me in the
man,
closet by myself.
I'm right there with you, Audie.
Yeah,
I'd be asking the same questions. I love that stuff.
I was so excited to see a long box Sega CD and display case. I was just
Yeah,
like,
man.
man, where'd you get this? Like,
That's
we made it.
that's awesome. I love hearing that stuff. I mean, I would have been right there with you, asking all these same questions about. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. I want to know about the Sega CD stuff. The
Especially, like, how is porting a Neo Geo game to the Mega CD? This seems like a totally valid question,
yeah. I
but
mean,
they were not interested.
yeah, I'd want to know that too. I mean, obviously they're both 68,000 microprocessors, but there's probably a bit of complexity involved to do that.
Probably. I
Yeah,
mean, color wise, I mean, the color palette would definitely be converted to something fierce,
yeah.
and just the clocking speed is very different. So, yeah, I would love to know the
Hmm.
story behind this. I guess I can find Didrik today and see if he's more willing to tell me. But
That's hilarious. Let me get some super chats here real quick. Avedon Smith. Oh, thank you, Avedon, for stopping by. $10. What's up, bro? Hope you've been well. I've been great, Avedon. Thank you for stopping by. I haven't seen you around in a while, man. But Merry Christmas and appreciate the message there. Brent McLean. I have loved the 3DO since way back. I was buying new games from the bargain bin in like 96 or 97. Is there a modern system that emulates the 3DO well? Thanks for all the hard work all year long.
unfortunately, the 3DO, I mean, you can do RetroArch,
Yeah,
and there is Opera that's okay.
yeah,
There's also the closed source Russian emulator Phoenix,
yeah,
which is getting there, but still has problems, like primarily with if you play games like Shadow, which no one should play, but a fighting game, but that one runs too quick.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something wrong with the way it clocks the games.
It's a complex system to emulate. I was working on a port of, I think it was 4DO, which is a open source emulator, 3DO emulator, and I ported it to the Xbox 360 as a homebrew project, and it's one of those emulators that runs 80% of games pretty okay, but because of the complexity of the custom chips, there's the the Madam and the Clio chips, and they kind of work together. Synchronizing everything and making sure it all works properly is very, very difficult. It's one of those emulators that just will run pretty well, but it won't run perfectly. And yeah, it's unfortunately one of those things where it would be really nice to get FPGA or a modern take on the old hardware, but I don't know if we'll ever see that.
Yeah, I mean, people, every time I'm on stream, people keep asking about the CDI FPGA, the CDI core for Mister. But I would love to see
Is that
a
a thing?
3DO core for Mister.
Is that a thing for real? CDI
No.
core?
That will never
Yeah,
exist. They just keep asking.
CDI's got that video complexity to it.
Yeah, that's all it has.
Digital
I mean,
video
the CDI
thing, yeah.
is it's not a game system.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a system that was reappropriated for games, but it is a video player that was going to have interactive entertainment capabilities. And so it actually has no dedicated hardware for games. Like there is no sprite handling, tile handling. None of this is being. Everything has to be done in software,
Mm-hmm.
which means that you're going to have CDI games. And there is also the digital video cartridge that's like an expansion
Mm-hmm.
you can put in, which does make, I mean, for video, that console probably has the best video until the PS2, maybe. I mean, I can't find many other consoles that has this crystal clear video on Thunder in Paradise
Mm-hmm.
as the CDI. But for games, it was just never good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yo-Yo Yoshio, £5. Would you say Saturn potentially could outshine the N64? Games like Sonic R show Saturn was capable of high poly levels and high risk textures. N64 struggled at. That's an interesting comparison to make. I would probably rate the Saturn above the N64. Maybe a little controversial, but I would think that it was a more capable system in the right hands,
Yeah, but it would have to be so right. I mean, so yes, if you used both VDP chips, then yes, you could definitely do. And I mean, Sonic R is an outlier because it's so good. Traveler's Tales did amazing with that. And Dead or Alive from Tecmo is another example, and Virtua Fighter 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the N64, I mean, in hindsight, it doesn't look good because the blurring, the AA that is applying. But I think in terms of like the game's scopes and what its capabilities in 3D was much more stable.
Yeah.
So you could do bigger worlds, and I don't think you could do an Ocarina of Time type game on the Saturn, no matter how you tried.
That would be really interesting to see them try to make that. I mean, yeah, I don't think you could either. That would be...
There's Croc.
Yeah. Yeah, right. But yeah, it's also difficult to compare a CD-based system to a cartridge-based one as well, in that regard. But I mean, I think ultimately the Saturn technically has more, more ability for sure. But it's really about the games at the end of the day. I mean, obviously the N64 is a great system as well, but it's also I don't think it's as strong as the Saturn is. I think it would outshine the N64. James Walters, $50. Thank you so much for your content. My Vita has been my best friend this year. Man, I love the PlayStation Vita. I still get salty about the way that Sony just killed that thing off.
Did you develop for it?
No, not at all.
I hate it.
What's that? You did?
I did, and I hated it.
What did you ship?
Memory handling. I hated. I hated it.
Yeah.
It was so difficult. We published a game called Rabby Ribby, which is a Metroidvania 2D game.
I am familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, limited run did the version, did the physical of it, and yeah, that was really hard to get that actually up and running on a console. And it's interesting because visual novels for those, most people are not too familiar with how they work, but visual novels in general, the way those engines work, are not friendly when it comes to memory. They load a ton of assets at once.
Mm-hmm.
The assets are usually not too compressed, which means that like you're doing a lot of raw memory dealings,
Right.
and it taxes the consoles so quickly because they're used to, either they're a derivative of the PC engine, not the PC engine console, but the PC engine
Yes.
that runs on, or it has kind of like a hack together console variation, which kind of like a Unity type deal today, because Unity also can be a little bit finicky when it comes to memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do visual novels, people think often that it's just like, well, should be so easy to port. It's just pictures and audio and dialogue, but it's like, yeah, but it's all that at once.
Yeah.
And it's raw. It's like it goes straight into memory, and it just taxes everything. And it's so hard to change that unless you reprogram the whole game, which is not cost effective, is not time effective at all. So I always had a pretty big problem with the Vita due to this.
Wow. Yeah, Sony in the past, they've had their struggles with developing on systems. The PS2 and the PS3 also come to mind, but I think in recent times they've made their tools a lot better. But yeah, I've heard similar stories about how it was tough to develop games on the Vita for very similar reasons as to what you said.
I think the Switch, I mean, it's not the same, but I think the Switch is a Vita done right.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Oh, that's a fail. Look at that.
I was saying before we started streaming, it's like, don't you like code emulators from ground up? And you're like a literal genius.
Getting destroyed at Lemmings.
I'm terrible at Lemmings too.
Yeah, it's
should have found another holiday game.
Yeah. This is the part where I start to struggle. I'm like 7 levels in, but I'll figure it out. But yeah, Vita was a great system. I'm sorry to hear about your horror stories of making the games for it, but a lot of people.
It's just the Vita fan base too. Never been a more dedicated fan base, I think, for handheld.
Oh, no question.
The Vita fans are dedicated, if I can use that word. I use it in a good sense, but it's like once you couldn't put a game on Vita in a timely fashion, which I was not good enough to get it on a timely fashion, and they were not happy about this.
Yeah.
It's like, it's on the Switch though. It's like, we don't want it on the Switch. We want it on the Vita. It's like, it's 2019. Can't we move on? It's like, no.
Wow. That's something that they probably want on the Switch by now, I would say, right? Is that ever coming to the Switch?
Oh yeah, I mean, most of the games we were doing on Vita was just moved to the Switch eventually, because it just also sales. I mean, the Vita did not have a large crowd, so to speak. So it depended on what kind of game you had, but generally you did make your money back.
Yeah. I think by 2019, I mean, when did Sony discontinue it? I think it was earlier than 2019. I mean, I would think it was like 2017 maybe, where they...
So they discontinued it, I think 2018 was it? Like, but you could still publish games for it, but they announced that physical tap was closing, right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing. That was kind of the loophole, because all the collectors for Vita, via like limited run, and bless those guys, they're great. So, but they had a very dedicated Vita fan base that picked up most of their Vita physicals, so you can make back your money that way.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of was worth the effort. But when they then closed off that tap so early, you just move over to the Switch basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think Switch is obviously where things are at these days, and probably will continue for a while. But Do you think?
I just wish that eShop was better, man.
Oh yeah,
I hate,
the
I
eShop,
hate
the
that
eShop's an
design.
absolute mess. It's an absolute mess. It's. I wonder if Sony will ever come back and release another handheld. Do you think they'll do it?
No.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Based on my discussions with them, no.
Yeah, it's
I
sad.
really
As
can't.
long as Jim Ryan's running Sony, I would agree. If the next president after has a different idea, maybe. But right now, yeah, I would say no.
I also don't I just don't think that really should be their business. If they want handheld games, I would rather do like Xbox does with like Switch. Like
Yeah.
when they release like Cuphead on. Like I think this makes more financial sense and opens up the market differently. But doing your own handheld, it's just way too difficult to establish yourself. Like it's been this way since the Lynx, and I mean the Lynx was an amazing system technically, but never got anywhere that one either.
Yeah, handhelds are definitely a risk, and Nintendo, obviously have been. I mean, they've been really successful with them for many years. What did you think about? Did you kind of read up on the recent news about the Switch was meant to be a 3DS kind of successor with backward compatibility to 3DS games and all that? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Do you think they did make? I mean, obviously they made the right choice considering they've sold 75 million consoles or systems. But
that question is already answered.
what do you think about a backward compatible 3DS Switch though?
I mean, yes, that would be cool. I think this is something they could do via their virtual console system anyway, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, with the cartridges, it would be cool. But it's hard to argue with the direction they went anyway.
Yeah, I definitely commend them with what they've done here. It's they've always had that connection, to the previous system. And when the Switch came out, it was interesting because there was no virtual console. It couldn't play 3DS games, and it seemed like it was like a clean break from their past. But I like the direction they've taken with it. I was a little I don't want to say unhappy, but I was a little confused as to why the virtual console wasn't really a part of their plans. But if you think of it another way, like, charging you money to buy the same games that you've bought over and over, for the last 15 years versus a Nintendo Switch Online service where you just basically you pay your $20 a year subscription and you can play a curated list of NES and Super NES games. Hopefully they'll add other systems. That kind of makes more sense to me in this day and age. It's that Netflix style subscription thing versus, hey, we're going to charge you $6 or $10 for the same game that you've already bought, 3 times before. So I think that they're definitely taking the right approach, with the hardware.
Well, they could have also just made an account system that actually, transferred between consoles.
They could have done that, but Nintendo, I think their infrastructure is still a long way behind the competition,
Yeah, it's a strange little company. Little. When you're talking about backwards compatible DS and 3DS, I was always curious why the Wii U, why they never made more out of that DS compatibility. Because they did like the Brain Age DS thing. I think, have you done a video on like emulation on the Wii U yet?
I have, yeah. It's pretty good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it was at the time before like nowadays when you have the new Xbox and whatnot. But I mean, it was a really strong emulation box, that Wii U.
Absolutely, yeah. I would rank it as one of the stronger ones. I've done a couple of videos on the Wii U as a really strong emulation box, and it's funny because no one really rates it very high as far as its power, but if you kind of put it next to a Sony PS3 and an Xbox 360, it's actually pretty powerful overall.
Yeah.
It can do a lot, but it's it's the Wii U. No one gave it a chance from the beginning, and I think it just has that reputation of being a slow and clunky system when it's really not at the end of the day.
No, I mean, it's it was a system that never lived up to its potential, though. That's for damn sure. I mean, that controller, I love the idea. There was probably many ways you could use it, but it was clear that even Nintendo, by the time like they made the new Mario games and whatnot, that didn't. It was always just a map, right?
Yeah.
It was always just like really nothing. But I was always curious why they did not do more with the DS compatibility, because I thought that was a really cool idea, and you could like have one screen up on the TV and like the touch screen on the pad, and I mean, this would have made total sense.
Yeah.
And you could have done several of those games again, and even 3DS. I'm pretty sure the 3DS could have been run on the Wii U. No?
Oh yeah, no doubt, it was capable of doing that.
So, yeah, strange. I guess they just discontinued the consoles. I mean, that's probably why.
Yeah,
they should have done it earlier.
That's another system I have a lot of love for, the Wii U.
Oh, same.
Yeah, it's it gets a bad rap, and a lot of it is self-inflicted, of course. Nintendo basically didn't give it a chance from the start, but there's a lot I like about that system.
There's a lot of good design on it. Generally I love the design. I don't mind even the stuff that people, control and whatnot. I think there's so many creative ideas you could have done with it. But I think the library it's quite curated. There's very little fluff on it. And I love almost every game I picked up for it. Even like Zombie U, if you remember that.
Yeah.
It was such a cool experience out of the gate. One of the best launch experiences I ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Must have been Zombie U. And that used pretty much the whole console to its capabilities, right?
Yeah, it was very, very good. You're right. It's probably one of the best launch experiences that you could have. Another game that comes to mind for me was Deus Ex: Human Revolution. That particular port, because it really took advantage of the touchscreen, and that was really good. What did you think about Devil's Third, though? Were you a Devil's Third fan?
I did pick up Devil's Third.
Did you like it?
What could have been? Yes, I did like it, but I mean, the community was not there for that. Where's the creator of that these days? He kind of left, huh?
There was some allegations about him. I don't know exactly what happened to him after Devil's Third, but I did follow his work for many years. I liked obviously the stuff he did on the Xbox with the Dead or Alive series and Ninja Gaiden, of course, were some of my favorite games. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully he'll resurface one day. Well, I'm not sure.
I hope whatever was out there that he cleared up and he could come back.
Yeah. Devil's Third was an interesting game. I don't want to say it's
from conception to release. I remember that.
Yeah. But the Wii U was a good system. I really liked the Fatal Frame game that they brought out for it. And look, a lot of those games are getting moved over to the Switch right now, which is great to see, especially because a lot of them, I think, deserve a second chance. It's a really good library of games. You're right; it's very curated and it's very small. All things considered, but there's definitely some really good stuff on there.
It's hard to buy a bad game for it. It's very rare you can say that about a console. But like almost anything you'll pick up on the Wii U will be a good game, or a good version of that game should be like Tekken Tag 2 or Deus Ex.
Tekken Tag 2 had Mario in it, right?
So it had costumes, it had the Nintendo costumes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So, which was really cool, yeah.
Someone in the chat saying that the last known work of Itagaki was being the advisor for the new Samurai Jack game. There you go.
Oh, okay, cool.
I was not aware of that, but good to see Itagaki's still involved in video games. But yeah, it'd be nice to see him work on a new project or something. But let's see. Let's read some more super chats here. There's a Russian name here, which I will have no idea how to read, but I will read the super chat. Merry Christmas, guys. Sorry for off-topic MVG. Will there be a video about Xbox One Series S community apps? It's better to get to know about the community before trying UWP development on console for me, and thanks for the inspiration. I'm not sure about that, if I'll dabble in that stuff. I know that, because with the new Xbox, you can load UWP apps. There is some chatter about, well, can you just, run, community apps and more homebrew. I'll definitely keep an eye on that one, but I wouldn't expect too much more content from me, at least. And another super chat, which again, I cannot read the person's name, so I apologize, but I'll read the super chat. Hello, MVG and Audi. Thank you for videos. Keep it in that way, from Russia with love. Thank you so much. Thanks. Definitely appreciate it. Let's see here. I'm on level 9 here, so I'm doing okay. It's probably my best game of Lemmings I've had in a long time.
Just took you 1 hour and 30 minutes to get there.
We're getting there. So tell us about the Turrican project, because I'm obviously a big Turrican fan, and I know you're kind of involved in that project. What's going on there, and what are we looking at as far as when we expect it to come out and all that stuff next year?
Yeah, so the Turrican Anthology was kind of put together by a company called Strictly Limited out in Germany, and of course the idea is to compile all the greatest Turrican experiences together. I know some people probably will ask, where is the C64 version and all this stuff, and unfortunately this was tied up in some legal mumbo jumbo that is way out of my control. I'm only kind of like a hired in producer, just to get out there before you ask. I know that there was lots of attempts of getting everything in there. Well, unfortunately, due to the way contracts were structured back in the day in the 80s, or rather not structured, there are some legal issues to get those different. So what's not on there is basically down to these kind of legal issues. But yeah, so the idea then was to create this compilation on modern consoles to kind of bring Turrican back, right? Because as you know, as a longtime fan, we haven't really seen Turrican since 1994 at this point.
Yeah.
So Super Turrican 2 was the last one, and then there's been attempts. There was Tornado on the N64 and GameCube, which never released, but we saw some pictures, and Chris made one track that was released publicly from Tornado. And then there was also the PS3 Turrican, which also never finished. So it's been attempts of bringing Turrican back, but now was the right time, I think, to kind of strike and do the compilation. So my involvement has been kind of to curate that process and kind of get all the guys and get the band back together, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
So I've been making the documentary with my dear friend John Linneman. So we're doing a documentary that details the creation of Turrican, the popularity, the fall of it, the rise, all these things. Everything connected to Turrican basically is discussed in this documentary. And will be, it looks to be quite a few hours. It will probably be a couple of hours at this point, the finished product.
Is that going to be bundled with the game, like the entire thing, or are you going to kind of edit it and all that stuff?
Yeah, so the special edition comes with a Blu-ray that has the documentary on it, and then the game itself will have some snippets as well. That's each game has its own menu, and then you can go in and see developers' comments on different subjects related to that game, kind of like you saw in like Samurai Showdown Collection recently, though we had the idea first. And then yeah, so there's the different games. The interesting thing about it, and you were kind of helping me out a little bit with this earlier behind the scenes, was that we did Amiga emulation on the Switch and PS4. And this is, to my knowledge, I mean, there was C64 emulation on the Virtual Console. A very few amount of games came out for it, but this will be the first time that the Amiga is officially emulated on the modern consoles.
Very nice.
And this had a lot of issues attached to it. Primarily the fact that these games run at 50 hertz, and
Yeah.
these new consoles will not allow us to run games at 50 hertz. And Turrican is one of those games that is hacked together to work on the Amiga. Even with the limited source code we had access to a source code.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened when we pushed that up to 60 frames per second or 60 hertz was that the internal timing of the game was broken. It wouldn't call up bosses. It would glitch out certain stages. So it was clear that like the internal timer in the game was dependent on 50 frames per second. So this meant that we had to figure out something to do with that frame rate, and we did some slight interpolation and frame blurring, which I think worked out pretty well. You played it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it worked out pretty well in the end.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but nothing can be. And then yeah, so hopefully now people can finally play Turrican. What was really fun for me was that one of the main issues I find people have with going back, especially to the micros, is the lack of buttons. And then the up to jump is usually a contention point. I speak, of course, of experience from Linneman, because John Linneman will always tell me, every time I show him a game, it's like, yeah, this looks awesome, it sounds awesome, but I hate up to jump. So when I joined the Turrican project, we actually modernized controls, so now every button has its own designated action, including the jump button, its own jump button.
That's good. Yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, if you grew up playing the Amiga, you're kind of used to it, you know. But choice, yeah, so. It's. But one of the things about Turrican 2, and I'm not sure if Turrican 2 had it, but Turrican 3 had. You could actually put it into joypad mode. So not many people realize that the Amiga can actually support 2 buttons. And I believe they added 2-button support on Turrican 3. But yeah, you're right. With Turrican and Turrican 2, you have to push up to jump. And if you're not used to doing that, it's very, very distracting. Very distracting.
Yeah, especially these days. I mean, you can imagine playing this on the Switch with, I mean, so you have the clicky well, it's not a D-pad, it's what's it called?
The Joy-Cons.
Yeah, well, the Joy-Con, yes, but what's the actual, like, D-pad looking thing?
Oh, it's just the D-pad. That's what I call it. The buttons.
I thought it had a name for it.
Yeah.
Like, in the guidelines, it has a name. But, anyways, yeah, so with the joystick, or the analog stick, on the Switch, the up to jump would not work, and I can tell you because I played, you know, the first revisions with up to jump on it, and it was so difficult to play it that way. So I think the modernized controls alone kind of makes that Turrican Anthology the version to get, even if it doesn't run in the perfect frame rate, which, you know, always breaks my heart. But with the slight fixes made to that, and then the modernized controls, I think it's the ultimate version of those games.
Was there not a 60 hertz NTSC version of those games? There probably wasn't. I mean, considering it was made in Germany.
Yeah, so there was never any of them ported. So one of them was released in the US, and, you know, I actually tracked down a copy of it, a physical copy, for us to test it out, because I was like, well, it was released in the US, very limited, but it exists, so let's check it out. And then when we got it, we realized it still runs at 50.
Mm-hmm.
It actually, so didn't matter. And as I mentioned earlier, bumping it up to 60, they would have had the same problem back then. The internal timer wouldn't have respected that change.
Yeah, I've got all 3 games, and I was convinced I had an NTSC version, but I don't. They're all PAL versions. You're right. I don't think they exist, or if they do, they're.
The console games have 60 frames per second versions, which are in. So Super Turrican, Mega Turrican.
Yeah.
I mean, Mega Turrican is an incredible game. If you haven't played that one, the Mega Drive version of Turrican is the finest Turrican of all time, in my opinion.
I would disagree with you. I think Turrican 2 on the Amiga is the finest one, but I would rank Mega Turrican a very close second.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, so they give two very distinct different experiences, because Turrican 2 is explorative, it's very open, and it's very much about kind of discovering uncharted territory, finding the secrets. It's very inviting and exciting,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Mega Turrican is a linear Contra style, just blazing action, and it's just exhilarating to play it. So I think both of them are worthy number ones in their respective series. It's just that they do different things.
Yeah, but
But yeah, so
I do
oh, go
agree
ahead.
that Mega Turrican is a really good game.
And I mean, Chris might have done one of the finest soundtrack. It is for sure the greatest Western soundtrack on the Mega Drive. There is no other Western developer that did a better soundtrack than Mega Turrican. I mean, you can contend with some Japanese games that are absolutely incredible. Of course, Streets of Rage 2 and these games from Koshiro.
Yeah,
But Chris did the finest Western soundtrack on the Mega Drive, and there's no discussion there even.
Yeah.
Like I can't, like you can bring up Green Dog as much as you want, but it's not as good as Turrican.
hey man, I'm a big Hillspec fan, so I will definitely back you 100% on that one. It's incredible. Like every time I listen to a Hillspec song on different hardware, he just knocks it out of the park. And even when I heard Super Turrican, the soundtrack for the first time on the Super NES, after being on a diet of the Amiga for many years, I was blown away by what he could accomplish on the Super NES, and Mega Turrican was exactly the same for me. You're right, he's the master.
He really, I mean, having worked with him as much as I have, it's quite the. I mean, him as a person, I don't think he minds me saying, a little bit disorganized, a little bit clumsy, but all the more lovable. But his music is just incredible, and it's like a trance for him. I've seen him work, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like he goes into the zone, and he has no limitation. But if he works with something that has limitation, he just bends it to his will.
Mm-hmm.
His very first composition was on. He had a electric organ that his grandmother had in the living room, and she made him play all these like gospel and Christian hymns on it when he was a kid, and he didn't like it. So what he did when his grandmother left was that he opened the whole thing and circuit breaker it, so that he could change the sound of it to make it sound more like a synthesizer. So that was his very first, attempt of like changing sound, and he wanted to make like Vangelis music
Yeah.
on this electric organ. So it just shows you what kind of person he is, because I can't even imagine doing that. Just opening it up and like fiddling with the circuits and modding an organ. But for him, that was his teenager years.
That's incredible. Do you think he peaked with the Amiga, or do you like really think that his C64 work is kind of underrated? Because he's done some really great stuff on the C64 as well that maybe doesn't get as much recognition as the Amiga stuff.
I don't know. So I mean, if you listen to, I actually don't think he peaked with the Amiga. I think had he had more of a chance, because he was someone that actually conformed to Redbook audio.
Mm-hmm.
There was many C64 and Amiga composers that could not do the change, over to Redbook audio, which Redbook audio, for those who don't know, means like actual digital music recorded onto CD. So that meant like either, arranging the music on a studio or live instruments, these kinds of things. So when you didn't have to deal with the SID chip anymore, these things, they couldn't kind of handle, it's limitless, yes, but also it's a completely different type of production. But Chris was someone that had his own studio and actually managed to do it. So he did like the Apedia studio album at the time, if you remember.
Yeah.
And all these wonderful things. And he actually did a PC Engine CD game in Japan, which is a game called Jim Power.
Yep.
And the very first time I met Chris, which was 2004, I think. We met. I had sent him fan letters as a kid, and he never replied to me, so I was really there to beat him up. But we were both at some kind of a show, like a symphony show for video game music, and he was a guest, and so was Nobuo Uematsu, who I also became friends with eventually. But no one was too aware of Chris, unfortunately, at this concert. But they all knew Uematsu did Final Fantasy, for those who aren't familiar. So during the intermission, everyone flocked to shake hands with Uematsu.
Yeah.
I had already met him and like actually done a project with him, so I was like, I don't care about that old man, but I really see Chris. I was like, man, and Chris is someone that, Chris is quite tall.
Yeah.
And he sticks out. He's about like 6'7", and I'm not. I'm like 5'8".
Right.
So he was a gigantic man, both his legend and his person. So he, Hulsbeck left the Symphony Hall and just went into the side areas. And I went after him, and I couldn't see him anywhere. I was like, man, like, where is he? And I turned around to go back into the Symphony Hall. And behind a bush that it reached him to his stomach, he was standing behind this bush hiding. And I was like, what? So I just walked slowly over. I was like, are you Chris Hulsbeck? And he was like, yes. Asked if he was surprised that I could see him through his like ninja skills. And I was like, yes, I'm sorry to interrupt you in your bush, but I was just want to say thank you because I'm a huge fan of yours.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, I probably got the story a lot, so he was expecting me to say Turrican probably or something like this. I was like, well, thank you so much. What's your favorite game? And I was like, Jim Power on the PZ Engine. And he's like, what? Like, Jim Power on the PZ Engine? No one's ever told me this before. It's like, well, that's the best soundtrack you ever did. And that was actually the reason we became friends to begin with.
That's fantastic.
He gave me a chance to talk to him because he's like, well, do you want to like meet up afterwards and like, get a kebab?
Yeah.
And I was like, sure. And then we started talking, and we actually became business partners very shortly thereafter.
That's awesome. Well, he lives in California, right? And he travels around in his RV. Is that right?
And now he lives in RV.
Okay.
Yeah, so he moved to in 1995. He moved to San Francisco because Factor 5 moved their operations there to work closer with LucasArts.
Mm-hmm.
And he joined at that time. So he lived in Petaluma, San Francisco until a few years ago. And then he had the idea that he was going to become the nomad composer. So he bought an RV, and now I think he's in Arizona these days.
Right on.
I still talk to him every day, but he still works in video games, and he actually worked on one of my games in Japan recently. And that was one of the best compositions he ever did. So I was very proud of him for that because there was a very different circumstance for him to work with a Japanese creator, and he had to do a flute and like all these live instruments and a very emotional song. Of course, the style is very bombastic, but he knocked it out of the park. So I don't think he's peaked yet. I think he has a lot of diversity in his music that hasn't been tapped into yet.
Wow. Someone in the chat was saying that they want to know more about you and Uematsu-san. You know him personally. So
yes,
tell her on the story, or tell us the story about how you met him.
Oh, okay. So, yes, I have many stories about Uematsu because we have drank together many times. I can tell you how I met and also how that ended up. So no, basically with Uematsu, I back in the 2000s. I mean, just to kind of clarify something about me and my work. A few years ago, I had a terrible like slump of depression, and I kind of left the industry. So this is why like the YouTube era kind of passed me by.
Mm-hmm.
But in the 2000s, I was working for lots of different magazines and game productions at the time. So at the time, yes, someone in the chat already knows the story. But yeah, so I was working for a lot of productions in video game music and magazines, and then especially video game music was kind of my forte because I had a lot of knowledge of it, and I had a pretty big network in Japan because I could actually kind of reach out to them and get these stories that most other people at the time couldn't. Today it's very different, but in the early 2000s, most people weren't crazy enough, to contact these people
Yeah.
and ask about the PC-98. So with Uematsu, it just kind of through happenstance, we met, and the thing that he liked about me, because we met at an after party where there had been like a symphony of Final Fantasy music and all these things, and I was invited to that concert, and then went to the after party, and the thing he liked about me was that after a few drinks, I had a lot of knowledge on wrestling, which he loves. He his number one dream in life was to become a pro wrestler, and he was in the pro wrestling club as a teenager. So this was like something that he like. If you talk to him about wrestling, he will talk more than I do right now. He will just
Really?
talk for hours and hours and hours. He knows everything, and he's very charming about this. And the other thing was that I was drunk enough to curse in front of him, and he loved the fact that I did not have any filter, and I actually cursed in front of him because everyone else was very like kind of frozen when this happened. It was like, oh no, like
Yeah.
you know, his precious ears can't take this.
Right. Right.
I just kind of like I never been starstruck or anything.
Yeah.
So I treat them like normal people, and so Uematsu just took a liking to me at the time, and so this just kind of that was the beginning of us. We just drank and talked wrestling a lot. And then I remember there was one time, this was in London in 2013 or 14, and they invited me to just come over for a concert they did. It was called Final Symphony. And so I came over to see him. It's a wonderful concert. And I saw him again. And we left early. I remember, I forget why we left early, but we left kind of before the encore was done. And went back to the hotel, the bar in the hotel specifically. And so we just started drinking a little bit and talking, just catching up. And then for some reason he was like, by the way, Audi, like, if you and I wrestle a match, I'll win. And I was like, old man, you're frail and your bones will break. You won't defeat anyone at this age. Like, just sit down. Don't do this. And he's like, okay. And he rolled up his sleeves and he's like, right here, right now. There's a carpet on the floor. Let's do it. And I was like, all right, like, let's do it.
Oh my God.
So we started wrestling. We were quite drunk, and we started wrestling. And he locked me in a abdominal stretch, and I actually countered it with a headlock takedown, like a judo throw on the floor. And he captured, scissored my head like with his legs. I got out of it, and I locked him in the figure 4 leg lock. This will not be up to anyone else but Ric Flair.
This is blowing my mind, dude.
I have pictures of it. I'll show you afterwards.
Oh man.
And but now the rest of the crew from Square Enix Japan, like his handlers and stuff, was coming into the bar area, and they saw us rolling on the floor, Uematsu with half his shirt off, and me like stretching his legs in an uncomfortable way. So they came in and broke it up. They were like, "Oh my God, what are you doing? Like, you can't hurt, this legend."
Yeah.
So they were breaking us up and holding us apart because they thought we were actually like having a quarrel and a fight.
Yeah.
And then, so as we were lifted up, Uematsu brushed off his shoulders, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry. He could never take me. He could never win." I was like, "Oh man, I'll take you next time. Next Sunday, I'll take you down." So
That's great. That's the infamous story, huh? So the wrestling story.
Yes, there's pictures of this.
I have to see these pictures.
Yes,
That's
unfortunately,
incredible.
I guess we can't show them on the stream, huh?
Oh no. You can send them to me later. I'd love to see them.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's a good one. I knew that you had some story to tell about him.
I have others, but we have to drink more.
You have to drink more. Well, we can do that. We can do that. Hopefully, at the next convention, whenever that will be.
Oh yes, I can't wait till we meet up again. And I did realize before we, because we've been talking primarily because the Turrican project, we became friends because you play tested a bit for me because I trust your opinion. But we realized today that We were actually at the same place at the same time last year.
Yeah, at E3, right?
Yes, but we wouldn't. We
Yeah,
did.
well, hopefully there will be an E3 next year. As much as I have concerns about the way that E3 has been run from an ESA standpoint, I do miss the show, and I would love to go back next year. Hopefully they'll announce it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean the time E3 for us is more about seeing friends. You know, like if you worked in the industry and like that's the one that's our Christmas.
Yeah,
Uh, I can understand from a consumer standpoint why it's fun to go and see all these spoofs and games, but I hate standing in line.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's
this isn't. I mean,
it's all the it's you're right. It's the networking. It's hanging out with people that you know that you're friends with and you don't get to see very often. And yeah, like standing in line waiting to play the next Nintendo game. I mean, it's not necessarily something that I'm that interested in. You know,
no,
I did a little of that. I did play Link's Awakening because they were they had that on the floor. But for the most part, I kind of kept away from the the big lines. But it's a good show. Hopefully, what do you think? What's your gut say? Do you think there will be an E3 next
no,
year?
next year, no. I don't think. Unfortunately, with the way things are right now with the pandemic and such, I don't think they'll be able to clear out the situation until summer. And this, you know,
Yeah,
you need a lot more headway to do a show like E3. So I don't think so. I think though in the fall we might be able to kind of go to PAX maybe
yeah,
or something like this. This would be fun, but I don't think E3 will happen next year. GDC, same of course. I'm a huge fan of GDC. Not so
yeah.
much fan of San Francisco, but I'm a huge fan of GDC. So
Well, that's another big networking event. I mean,
yeah, it's a wonderful event for
yeah,
that. So.
yeah. I did hear that they pushed GDC to the summer, so
Oh,
they may have it next year, but whether they do it still may be very compressed, as compared to what you normally would expect from that show. But yeah, I mean, I'll pretty much take what we can get next year. If it's PAX later on in the year next year, then that may be the one to go to. But I definitely do miss going to those things.
see, I miss the Jagfest.
I heard about that. Yeah, that's the one in Europe, right? Where
Yeah,
like
so
all these diehard Jaguar fans get together
yeah, from
and
around the world. I mean, I went there last year, and it's a great little convention where all the main Jaguar people show up. And yeah, this year would have been their 20th anniversary. Actually, it's been going on for 20 years now. Believe it or not,
wow.
the Jagfest. And they were gonna have a big show this year, and it couldn't happen. So I hope next year we can go there. That's a show you should go to, the
I
Jagfest.
was supposed to go to, well, this year obviously was just an absolute write off, but I was supposed to go to Amiga 35 in Holland.
Yeah,
S-
I was at Amiga 30 last year. The
So
one that was
I actually had the entire trip booked, and it wasn't just flying from here to Holland. It was a European trip that kind of went through a few countries. We booked it all and paid for it and got hotels and everything. And life pandemic happens, and now chasing up refunds and getting your money back on hotels and stuff was not fun. But would have been nice to go. But hopefully next year we can hit some events again. But
Do you know the story behind Jagfest? Why it exists?
I don't actually, and I will tell you that I'm not the world's biggest Jaguar fan.
Oh,
I had one for a hot minute, but I got rid of it because I just thought I have no emotional connection to this machine. So
it has a Bubsy game.
oh look,
Very
it's got some good games on it. I really am a fan of some of those games. The NBA Jam conversion is very good. I would say it's one of the better ones. Some of the ports from the Amiga are pretty good too.
Most of the games there are ports from the Amiga, though. I mean, the process is so similar, right? So that's the thing. Had the Jaguar just been handled better, it could have been, it could have been what the Amiga CD32 should have been, right?
Yeah.
Like a console Amiga with great support, but obviously didn't happen. But yeah, Jagfest. The reason why it exists is that it's a small town in Germany. I forget the name. I apologize for this, but there's a very small town in Germany where Jagfest takes place, and it draws in like 100 Jag enthusiasts from around the world, including myself, each year. The reason why that place is the spot for Jagfest was that the European allotment for Jaguars was in that town. The warehouse that stored most of the Jaguars being sold in Europe was in that town. And there was a fire that burnt most of that stock. It was a pretty big hit for Atari at the time. And one of the smaller reasons why it kind of failed. But that town, when the fire happened, they checked if the systems still worked, if there was just a plastic that, and for the most part, it seemed that the consoles worked. So it's a whole town where kids got a free Jaguar. So everyone all the kids in that town on the street had a Jaguar. It created this little community that was super into the Jaguar because they got it for free when they were a kid. And now they created Jagfest. So if you go there in the display case, you actually can see some of these burnt Jaguar cases that they still have there.
That's incredible.
So it's a little town in Germany where everyone had a Jaguar. Like a bizarre world of video games.
What's the story with the dentist thing? You know, the shape. You know, do you know about that?
I think that was just the mold being sold. Yeah, after because the mold was sold. Like actual production molds are extremely expensive, right?
Yeah.
So when they were clearing stock, because they made the Jaguar an open system and they sold off and shared all the stuff surrounding it. So the mold was just sold off. And that's why it also eventually showed up as that chameleon system.
Oh yeah, that thing. Yeah. Yeah, that was a big scam, right? I mean, that was just
that was just like
just a shell, right? With some, what was it, like TV tuner card inside of it or something? It was
even the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
It was like really like a TV tuner.
Well, that's the other thing about the Jag. It's we talked about the 3DO earlier, but it's one of those systems that's pretty hard to emulate as well because of its custom chips and the timings around it. Someone in the chat's schooling me about how to beat this level. I've been on level 8 for like the last. I know. Use the bridge builder, 2 of them at the start, then place a blocker at the end of the bridge. When you blow up the blocker, it won't take out the ground. Oh, that's a good hint.
That's very nice.
I'll try that.
Thank you for
your. But yeah, so tell me what it is about the Jag that you like, other than it just being some interesting exotic, hardware.
Well, Bubsy.
Bubsy.
So I just have a love for. So I want right now. I want to use the word misunderstood consoles, but I don't think the Jaguar is misunderstood. I think it's fairly well understood. But what is interesting about it is that still the games that are on the Jaguar you can only experience on the Jaguar. They weren't ported much, or most of the exclusives were never ported, right?
Yeah.
So you got some arcade games like NBA Jam, like you mentioned. There's a flashback version on it that's really good.
Yeah, I've seen that one. That's actually really good.
Yeah, and but just like it has that open sensibility that I loved about the Micro. Is that today we have indie gaming, right? But I think the CC4, the Amiga, and to the extent of Jaguar, that was kind of the original seeds of that kind of community, that kind of open-minded, free development philosophy that kind of allowed so many people from either bedrooms to small studios to develop for it.
Yeah.
And the Jaguar still has a little bit of that left in it. It's got a little bit of Amiga in its heart.
Mm-hmm.
I just, as I mentioned earlier, I just wish they took this to the next step instead of doing like white men can't jump. I mean, I know it's a factual thing to state, but it's not a good game.
Yeah.
So it's just I can't say there's any great games on the Jaguar. I can say there's some good ones, but I don't think there's ever been a great one. Can you
Yeah.
think of a great Jaguar game?
I liked there was, I can't remember the name of this game. Someone in the chat will probably know, but there was that motorbike game that reminded me of like a Sega Super Scaler game. That one,
Super Burnout is really good.
that one really kind of stands out for me as an impressive game.
That's a proof of concept of what you could have done with the Jaguar had they put their resources into it.
Yeah.
Because that's a super scale game, kind of a lost super scale game. It runs the perfect frame rate, 60 frames per second, and just plays really well. Really large sprites, clear, nice graphics and color. So, and Rayman is another game. Rayman is better on the CD systems, but it's still very impressive for the Jaguar.
Tempest 2000, obviously. Yeah.
Never liked Tempest.
You're not a Tempest fan? Not a Minter fan?
And not a Minter fan.
No?
I mean, I respect him, but I mean,
yeah.
Have you played the one? I mean, you can play Tempest on the new one.
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
Let's talk about the new one.
Yeah, you want to talk about exotic hardware? That's definitely up there with one of them. No,
basically Jaguar 2.
Yeah. I mean, the new one is definitely a system that I'd like to get my hands on, mess around with.
Good luck with the controller.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't know if you saw my video, but one of the games, Freefall 3050 AD for the new one.
Oh yeah.
There was an original Xbox version that was supposed to come out for it, and I hit up the developer, and it never came out. It was unreleased, and I offered to finish the game and release it as homebrew, and we did. So it was fun to get into that world. And I remember
that was you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was fun to get into that world because I got a lot of access to the new one hardware for a short time and played around, and yeah, man, that system is interesting. But you're right, I think getting the player is easy, or not too difficult, but getting the controllers is
the controllers are almost
the
impossible to get now. Yeah, and you can't even, like, the connector is proprietary, like the connection is, so you can't just like swap it out with another connector, or I don't think they made any like gateway adapter. So yeah, it's just an impossible cost to get into unless you want to spend like $300-$400 on the controller.
Yeah, it's not worth it. And that's another system that only has a handful of games, right? Like
yes, it has like
12?
Berlin Racing. I think it has Iron Soldier.
Yeah,
and
Tempest 3000.
There was a port of Doom, but that's unofficial.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Freefall was another one, 3050 AD.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's only a handful of games for it. But
yeah, that's basically a console that's like answers the question: what happens when you combine the CDI with a Jaguar? You get the new one.
Well, the rumor is Ken Kutaragi kind of saw what was going on with the new one, that they were putting in game systems in DVD players, and he kind of flipped it around, and that's why the PS2 had DVD hardware in it, because he was adamant that it needed DVD hardware, because even though the new one was such a failure, that's where the market was going at that time, and that's why they did it.
No, that's interesting. I never knew Ken Kutaragi would have any knowledge of the Jaguar or new one or anything like this. So
he was definitely keeping a close eye on that stuff. I don't know if he knew about the Jaguar, but the stories I read was he saw what was going on with the new one stuff, but rather than put a video game system in a DVD player, he put the player in the system. Kind of flipped the script a little bit on that one. But Let's read a couple more super chats. I can't beat this level, Audi. This level is killing me. So I'm probably going to we'll read a few more super chats and then we'll chat for another couple of minutes and then we'll finish up for tonight. But let's see here, Matunumi. Thank you for the super chat. My family just mentioned Wii Bowling, and we may actually play it later. CRT is still hooked up for Smash Melee. Can you believe Wii Sports is 14 years old? Merry Christmas. I cannot. Can you believe that?
No, I cannot. That just makes me feel so old.
Yeah, the Wii is, it's a few generations old now, which is crazy to think about. Wishbone, $5. Surprised no one has done a remake stage demo of Beetle Adventure Racing in Unreal Engine 5. Imagine the possibilities. Level destruction combos.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good game, though. I mean, it looked very impressive.
Yeah. I have a soft spot for Beetle Adventure Racing. It's definitely a good one. You mentioned that you took, you kind of stepped out of the industry for a while due to personal things, and you end up coming back. What was the motivator to get back into the world of video games after you kind of stepped away for a while?
Yeah, so I stepped away just due to extreme burnout. I had taken on way too much work, and I had also a personal project. I wrote a book that was about every single wrestling game ever made, and it just wasn't ready for the undertaking of that. I mean, it required me to go all over the world and talk to these developers and find all these games, and so I just bit off too much, more than I could chew at the time, and also a lot of things that went wrong out of my control. So
yeah,
I kind of left with the idea of like working on that project and my own day job, just kind of on the side, and kind of felt like another issue I had. Yes, Simpson Wrestling is included in the book. You can go on Amazon and pick it up right now.
Nice.
It's Wrestling with Pixels. But yeah, so at the time, I was working localizing video games, and then writing that book, and then trying to recover. And just my problem was that I felt I had peaked.
Yeah.
I had done all these things in the 2000s. I had lived in Brazil and written for magazines there. I had worked in Japan. I worked in the US, and I felt like no matter what I was doing in the 2010s, I'm a huge critic of myself. I'm very self-critical and very hard to please when it comes to myself. So I just kind of felt like I peaked when I was like in my 20s. Like, this is very sad, and I should just let the younger people kind of come and take my spot.
Right.
So I left, and yeah, so I was kind of in a deep depression for several years, and then my wife always supported me and was just kind of like, take your time, do what you can, and just don't give up.
Yeah.
And then I think what really made me come back was John Linneman, because at some point he was familiar with my work back in the day a little bit, and I had been told by someone else, a colleague of mine in Japan, that like, hey, there's this guy on YouTube, he's doing these documentaries. Didn't you used to do this stuff too? Like, didn't you write for magazines and like do these retrospectives? I was like, yes, but the YouTube stuff is not my arena. I don't know anything about it. I never heard of him. Not interested.
Yeah.
But the video was about Soul Reaver, the Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, and a game I don't really have much interest of. But the way John presented it was like incredible to me. I had never realized that people were doing this amazing work on YouTube. Like, I really had no idea. So I decided to look into him and realized we were both on, at the time, we were both on NeoGAF, a very different forum then.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of like, well, I should hit him up and just say thank you and say like, yeah, I used to do kind of similar stuff, and I really am pleased to see that people are doing way better than I ever could. So I reached out to him, said like, thank. And then John kind of recognized me slightly, It's like, hey, I kind of know your name, and thanks for reaching out. I'm burnt out these days myself because I told him that kind of burnt out and kind of gone. So he was like, yeah, I'm also burnt out, but let's keep in touch. I remember your work, and it would be fun to kind of pick your brain sometime about some of these games you've written about, worked on, whatever it would be. And then basically his friendship and my wife they kept pushing me. And then the Bubsy video happened because I went out to see John to visit him with no intention of being on video. I can tell you that much. Of the idea that I would never step in front of a single camera.
Yeah.
We went there and he was like, "Do you have an idea for an April Fool's video?" And I was like, "Well, I guess we could do Bubsy, but the joke should be that we do it serious. We never break character, and we do a real episode of Bubsy, and that's the joke." He was like, "That's great. Can you script that?" And I was like, "Sure." So I wrote the script for it, and it just kind of happened that you should be on camera for this because we should have the Bubsy expert. He had the Resident Evil expert at the time because he had done a Resident Evil 2 video shortly before, which had an expert on it. So he's like, "Oh, you should be the Bubsy expert, like we did in the Resident Evil video." So it's it mirrors each other. And so I stepped in front of the camera. I didn't know, I just winged it there and then, one take. And then figured that would be it. And I also figured that would be very much like Poochie the dog in Simpsons. So it would just kind of be like, oh, who's this new kid? It never worked for Married with Children, and it shouldn't work on DF Retro to introduce a new kid with blonde hair. So I was very much prepared to just kind of be hated and leave. But what happened was that people really enjoyed that Bubsy video, and some people remembered me, of course, and some people were just kind of like, "That guy is really funny." And I'm not sure why, they said that because I was just talking about Bubsy.
Yeah.
But this led me to just kind of feel better about myself. So John's support and the fan support literally saved my life because I was completely done with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, John, kept inviting me back for more and more DF Retro, and these days people tweet to me every day that I should be back and play the CDI. So after 20 years in the industry, my legacy is that I have to play the worst games ever made, which I appreciate. Even if it is the worst games, I do appreciate that fans.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. I will say that digital or DF Retro is, it's been a huge influence on my work as well. Sometimes I'll watch a DF Retro video and I'm like, man, that was a really, really well put together video. And I did some videos this year. One that stands out for me was the Resident Evil video that I did on the Nintendo 64, just talking about how the developers managed to fit it all into a single cartridge, 2 CDs, which I think was probably my favorite video that I did this year. I know there was probably more successful ones than that, but for me it was probably the most fun that I had making a video for a while. And watching the Resident Evil DF Retro was an inspiration for that video. And I love the work that you and John do on DF Retro. It's some of the best quality out there on YouTube.
For as good as the videos he makes is, the person that John is unspeakable. He's just an incredible person behind the camera, and he never had any reason to really step out for me and invite me into this world, because shortly after the Bubsy video, we were at the E3 together, and for whatever reason, again, him and Richard just said, "Why don't you correspond, and do the videos for E3? Why don't you do the update videos every day with John?" And at that time, they had no reason to trust me or see any potential in me doing these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But they just did, and that little gesture made me kind of believe in myself too. And yeah, John's support has been absolutely life saving. So, and same of course with people I met like My Life in Gaming and you and Retro RGB.
Yeah.
All these people came out and like have been so friendly and nice to me and made me feel at home again. So, because that was the biggest problem I had was I just never felt at home anywhere because I didn't allow myself to feel uh, at home in any capacity, whether it be at home in real life or online or wherever it would be. I felt like I had peaked and just like, oh, the people online now do better than me,
Yeah.
so let me move on. But these days I'm back, I guess. So it's a very good feeling, and 2020 has been very good for me in that sense because I reached out to a lot of people. People reached out to me, and even the other day, you had something for me where you made me contact Spencer Nielsen, the composer of like Echo the Dolphin and stuff on Sega CD. And I hadn't talked to him in 13 years.
Hmm.
And as soon as I sent that email, he was very friendly and we started talking again. And it's just these small gestures. I guess I kind of forgot when I was down the dumps
Yeah.
that you just reach out. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic to hear, Audie. And I mean, the work that you've done has been incredible, and just the fact that you're here and you're doing what you do is definitely an inspiration to to myself as well. And yeah, man, like 2020 was an interesting year, for I think for a lot of us. Health wise, in the world, it wasn't particularly great, but I'm glad to hear that it has gone well for you for sure.
yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. I mean, this year for DF, we did the Final Fight video, which is like a feature length documentary. We did Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, I loved how you guys didn't skimp on Streetwise, the most
Oh
the most
yeah,
misunderstood Final Fight game, which I don't think is that bad. I mean, it's not a Final Fight game, but it's not a bad beat 'em up or a brawler in the grand scheme of things. I think it's pretty decent.
yeah. That just short. That video was produced in 4 days. That was the weekend. John asked me, "Do I have any idea of something we can do quick?" And I said, "I would love to do the definitive final fight." And he's like, "Can you script that?" And I said, "Okay." So I scripted the whole episode in one night. And the next day, we recorded the whole thing, like the voiceover. And I felt like, well, we should do something extra. So I animated that entire intro. Oh, sprite edited. I didn't, make the sprites from ground up. I edited them all to look like John and Bubsy and Richard and all the My Life in Gaming, all these different people. And all this was done in 4 days, which, for 1 hour documentary that actually encompasses the whole series, I think was pretty well done.
Yeah, no, it was a great video. I those style of videos are my favorite of the DF retro ones. The other one that I really liked, it was probably before you got back involved with John, but the Silent Hill one he did was very
Oh yeah.
memorable for me as well. Just going back and telling that story about Team Silent and how they were just this group of misfits in Konami, these kind of this group of people that Konami didn't know what to do with, and the stuff that they did was absolutely amazing to hear about, because I never knew the story about how those games kind of got put together. But he covered
That's the
that run
fun
really
thing.
well.
Yeah, the fun thing about DF Retro, because nowadays I produce a lot of them with John, and even the ones I don't appear in, I try to help as much as I can. But it's fun to take, because as I mentioned, I'd written all these magazines back in the day, and recently we did a couple of videos where we played. One was Usagi Yimbo on the C64, the Samurai
I'm
War.
very familiar with that game.
Yeah, so we did a long play of that, and I actually directed and edited that episode myself
Mhm.
because I'm such a huge fan of that game and the comic, and I wanted to make that video a halfway where it's like it's a long play, yes, but it actually references and cuts to footage like a DF episode, and people were very happy about that. And then another one was Quackshot. And the interesting thing about both of these were that back in the day, I'd actually written articles regarding those games for magazines. And actually, for the Quackshot one, I worked directly with Disney back in 2009 to catalog all their Donald Duck games. And this was supposed to be actually published in Scandinavia in the Donald Duck and Co. Magazine at the time. And then Disney kiboshed it because it was too much copyright, because all these different games were developed by different people.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't viable. So it was posted online on Hardcore Gaming 101. And that article is very popular. And I could use all that with DF. And it was really kind of full circle for me when I did that, because it was like, I used to do this stuff, I left, and now I'm producing DF retro episodes based on this content that I created, now 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey for me.
What are your plans for 2021 as far as DF and DF retro? Any previews or secrets you can reveal about what's coming?
So the one I'm working on right now is a complete flashback episode.
Nice.
But every version of flashback, I think that's another one that really influenced me.
There's a lot of those too.
There's a lot of them. That's why it takes time. And then secrets.
Do you cover the flashback sequel, the 3D one that they did?
Yeah, the Fade to Black.
That's it. Yeah.
There. And then the Game Boy Advance canceled one is in there, and then there's also the canceled Flashback 2, which was never released, but it was like this mech fighting game that very strange.
Was that Delphine that did that? Was it
Delphine?
Okay.
The sprite work survives, but the game was never published. So Flashback will be a big episode next year. We have a huge announcement coming in January that's not DF related, but it is John, I, and some other people related. So if you follow me on Twitter, I'm sure you'll see it. Or if you follow John already, you'll see it.
Well, everyone in the chat, follow Audi on Twitter. The link to his Twitter is in the description below. So you don't want to miss that announcement. I don't know what it is, but I'll be definitely keeping an eye on it for sure.
I'm sure you're gonna be roped in. Like you say. And yeah, so there are lots. We have lots of DF retro in production, and I'm also working with My Life in Gaming on some stuff. And man, when are you and I doing something? That's what I'm waiting for now.
Oh yeah, I'd love to, man. Like maybe when I don't know, we can do the Shantae project or something when that game comes out. I mean,
yeah, you worked on that.
Yeah, right. we could do something together, I'm sure. I got some other ideas that we could do, but we'll definitely put a pin in that one, because I think there's definitely some opportunities to work together on some stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I really want to. That probably is my 2021 wish, is to work with more. I helped Clint LGR with some videos this year, and that was fun because he did some PCFX stuff.
Yep.
But I would love to do something with you. I would love to do something with Joe from GameSack.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully in 2021 I just kind of get to be the sidekick of YouTube.
Yeah, well, it's awesome to hear that you're going into next year full steam ahead. I really appreciate that, and that's great to hear. We're going to wrap it up here very shortly. I've got one more super chat here to read out. It's from Venesaria, a friend of the channel. Thank you so much. $5. Happy holidays, MV Gamer, Audi, and all the fans here. Thank you to everyone here for making all this possible. You are fantastic. GameCube is better than N64. Well, you got most of that right. I still rate the N64 better than the GameCube. It's a running argument that we've got going on here. But now I have to ask you, which is the better system, the GameCube or the N64?
I have to say the N64, because it has the Aki wrestling games on it.
Yeah, and it has Blast Corps. I mean
Blast Corps.
You know,
I love the GameCube. Man, is that a technical marvel? It's time. But the N64, I had so much fun with it with friends. and so many like defining moments. You know, playing Mario Kart 64 and
Yeah.
all these F-Zero X. Um, I when I think back to the N64, I feel happier than I feel when I think about GameCube, and I feel pretty happy about the GameCube.
I feel the same way. For me, it's nostalgia. It's the emotional side because I was a college student when the N64 came out. So I remember playing GoldenEye, you know, when I was in college with friends, and I remember, you know, I've never had many feelings in video game history where I felt like this system is a complete game changer, but that you know, the first time you played the N64 after, you know, owning a Super NES for many years, I mean, it just kind of blew you away with what it was capable of doing, you know. And I just have a really kind of soft spot for that hardware. GameCube is still an incredible piece of technology, and I mean, it's a great system. But for me, I just love the N64. You know.
What's interesting about both of them is that, at least for us in Europe, the launch experience were very similar because when I bought my N64 in Europe, I bought Shadows of the Empire and that Hoth stage, which
Yeah.
is mind blowing.
Oh yeah.
And then when I bought the GameCube, I got Rogue Squadron 2, and then that was mind blowing and still is actually. That's
Yeah.
Factor 5. And so it's interesting how Star Wars kind of defined those two consoles for me.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Well, we are going to leave it here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for the last 2.5 hours, Audi. It was fun, man. We've been talking about doing this for a while, but what better time than Christmas Eve? You know, I think it was definitely awesome having you on. Any final words you want to let people know where they can find you, and you know, any other kind of parting words before we wrap up?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at PC98_Audi if you, for some reason, want to follow me there. And no, just thank you to everyone, even if you weren't familiar with me. All the questions and all the comments and all the confusion around the car today. It's so much fun, and I really love just being in this community and seeing all the support and fun that you provide. So it means a lot to me, even if you don't realize. To everyone in the chat.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much again for hanging out. As for me, I'm taking a little break on videos, but I'll be back on January the 4th with, you know, my regular videos. But I'll be off next week, just taking a little break and just, you know, getting things all prepared for next year. But hey, everyone in the chat, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We've had a fantastic time. Have a wonderful holiday wherever you are in the world. Enjoy your time off if you are having time off. And we will see you again. Take care.
Tack så mycket.